Hi guys, Steven Central here and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be continuing on with our reviews, but we're going to be pivoting back to like early David Tennant stuff, more as a point of comparison and also as a popular request, and we're going to be looking at Midnight, which is from David Tennant's final season, this fourth series with Donna, and it was the fourth series overall of the new series, which I got on here. Though, strangely enough, this story, despite being regarded as one of the best stories, and I probably would argue is one of my favourite Russel T Davis penned stories as of this moment, it usually gets tagged on behind the stories that precede it. As you can see in the discs, it sort of just gets tagged on with the Silence the Library, Forest of the Dead, that has River Song's first story, and then right after it is the beginning of the sort of final series for big arc, which also sort of starts to tie up all of Russel T Davis's like 4-season run. So I think, despite being a very well-liked story, it's sort of forgotten about within the sort of like marketing and everything. There's not much marketing for it in like at the time, mainly because the concept of it is so kind of uniquely different to any stories that we had beforehand, and really any story that's kind of come since, unless you're maybe looking into the Big Finish audio dramas. But aside from that, there isn't much there's not much in it that can sort of, that's like there's no recurring villain. It's not like the Daleks or anything, so it's just sort of an unusual story. But before we get into it properly, if you do consider liking and if you do enjoy this video, please consider liking and subscribing, as it does help me out a lot. And then next week, hopefully, we will continue on reviewing the recent stuff with Wild Blue Yonder, The Giggle, and then Church and Ruby Road, and then we will move into some other reviews, hopefully some reviews of like storylines and series going forward, including Big Finish stuff that I've been recently listening to, and the new series, and then obviously some of the classic series as well. But yeah, getting into Midnight, a brief overview of the story. It's set on this planet called Midnight, and it's a very weird one because it's a sort of Donna light story, the companion's light story, akin to the classic Deadly series, The Deadly Assassin, where there's no companion. Though Donna is in the beginning of the story, she just doesn't really, she's not in it for really. She's in the beginning, she's in the end, which is fair enough, because she then has a huge role in the next story. Turn Left becomes basically a Donna story in itself without the Doctor really in it. So possibly they decide to film these two in conjunction, because aside from small scenes in both of them, the kind of main two characters and the Doctor and Donna were separate, so they could sort of probably film these in conjunction. I don't know, that's just a theory. I'm sure the Doctor Who Confidential show would possibly mention that, but I have not actually seen them. But it's set on this planet called Midnight. The Doctor sort of goes on this like train journey to witness like parts of Midnight, this like really beautiful area of Midnight, but they can't see anything at the moment because the visors have gone down on the train, and he's with a group of people, all of whom have never met him, and this entity starts attacking the train. But the entity isn't like a Dalek or a Cyberman, it's not a Sontaran or, you know, a Rutan, it's not like a defined thing, it's just called the Midnight Entity. We don't really know what it is. Russel T Davis has never really explained it. Moffat and Chibnall never sort of brought it back or referred to it. There's a high chance that Russel T Davis will probably never even bring it up in terms of trying to explain what it was with his new stuff. If he does, I almost think that possibly would ruin the mystery and eeriness around the episode to a degree. So I hope he doesn't. But it sort of attacks the train and latches onto this character, and she sort of starts repeating the things that all of the people are saying. So all of the other crew, which include some quite big cast members, obviously David Tennant being there, but Michael Troughton, I believe it was, or no, not Michael Troughton, David Troughton, one of the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton's sons, was there, and David Troughton also plays the King Peladon in the Curse of Peladon, the John Pertwee story, and also the guy from Merlin, the guy who plays Merlin, he's on the train as well, and it's this woman has sort of been possessed by the Midnight Entity, and then she starts repeating what everyone's saying, and then it sort of latches itself onto the Doctor, as it then only starts repeating what the Doctor's saying, and it does it in an eerie way of it repeats them, then it says it at the same time as them, and then it eventually starts saying it before the Doctor, though it sort of paralyses the Doctor into a state where he can't move, and the other passengers start to think that he's then got the entities affecting him and left the woman. And it's a good episode because, unlike many stories, classic and new series, when the Doctor gets thrown into a situation, they sort of have that little instant distrust of the Doctor, maybe, but they follow him quite easily. They don't sort of complain or try and halt the Doctor at any point. I recently watched The Mark of the Rani again, and if you've seen The Mark of the Rani, it's quite they have that instant distrust of the Doctor because he lies at the front gate, but then they sort of quite quickly just believe the Doctor and just go along with what he's saying. Same in the new series. If you're thinking I don't know, the Aliens of London World War III with the Slovene, they sort of, the unit is supposedly in the background, so that's why he has maybe more sway. But he sort of does get a lot of they just accept him doing stuff. There's no kind of but hang on, why do you have that authority? And in this story, it's really good because there's so much skepticism of the Doctor. There's one beautiful scene where the other passengers are clearly terrified of the Doctor and the Midnight Entity, because I think they start to think that maybe the Doctor is kind of enjoying it too much, which they then confront him about. And there's a brilliant scene where he sort of says that he's enjoying it and it's because he's just more clever. I think he says it's just because he's clever, and rather than that sort of being but he's clever, therefore we let him do his thing, they all just start going in on him for calling them stupid, and it's a proper, really good mob mentality of sort of fear of change, when it's that natural human reaction of fear that then causes a reaction, sort of if you're afraid of something, you react in a certain way. And I think that was very much the idea, is it's looking at that idea that when dealing with something that the unknown, humans' initial reaction is very much fear, which gets brought up in other episodes, thinking the Christmas invasion, the first David Tennant story, Harriet Jones blows up the Sycorax island spaceship. It's that idea that fear of the unknown is kind of releases that reaction. But in this one, it's because it's such on a deeper sort of, you're kind of the only set, aside from the very beginning, we're only on this train for the whole time with pretty much this set cast, and you kind of watch them spiral and spiral and spiral. And I think without Donna being there as the companion that sort of reassures them that the Doctor knows what he's doing, and she's on the same level as them almost, in terms of she understands why they'd be afraid. I think without her being there, it means that the Doctor is so much more isolated because he has no one that knows him, and they're all starting to gang up on him because there's two people there's two companions together, there's two people that were travelling together, and then there's a family as well, and then there's this one woman who's been possessed. So he's sort of isolated from the group because the other people have other people with them that they know, and it's an interesting thing for the Doctor because he's usually with a companion like Martha or Amy or Rory or Donna, who would be in most of the stories around this time, and it makes for an interesting dynamic, and I think it's really good. The one other kind of notable character, and it's the stewardess character, who eventually saves the day. Unusual to some episodes that it was the stewardess who saved the day, and she sort of she figured out that the doctor wasn't possessed because of the language she used, which I know they've attempted to use Alonzi a lot, but the whole idea of using molto bene, I thought that was a bit contrived because he used it once at the beginning of the episode, but he doesn't use it. He uses it twice, I think, in his entire reign, and his entire like run, and it's in the beginning of midnight, near the end of midnight. That's it, which sort of means feels a bit unbelievable. But yeah, I think it does. Ultimately, the story is brilliant, and I think despite it being heralded as one of the best, and I personally think as well, it is probably Russel T Davis' like best work. Though I do think it gets eclipsed by Stephen Moffat penned stuff later on and possibly beforehand. It's a brilliant story. I think the kind of use of that mob mentality of fear and what the fear initiated certain reactions is brilliant, and sort of flips a lot of the stuff in Doctor Who we take for granted on its head. I just think it's really smart, it's really divisive, and it's similar to a lot of Russel T Davis stories. I think, like Boomtown, which is another one of my favourite stories from Series 1, Russel T Davis is when he does one-off stories that don't really have much in terms of building up to a bigger story, he writes them really effectively. Those one-off 45-minute stories are brilliant. He doesn't need to make loads of big arcs. I don't think those are good, so hopefully when he does the new stuff with Shooty, he can make really strong one-off stories that don't need to have like a big arc feeding into them, because I think he is really good at making just a story within a 45-minute episode that can be really well written, and I think Boomtown shows that, and I think this story Midnight shows that, and I'd say that there's other stories like that from Series 1, like Father's Day, even some from Series 2, that like really just show that he can really well write just one-off stories, and he doesn't need to have a bigger kind of overarching stuff, which he does in like with the Master and stuff, and they can still be really effective and arguably better than some of his bigger stuff, like, you know, the Stolen Earth Journey's End arc, or the Last of Time Lords storyline, despite the fact that those are within themselves really good stories. So not putting them down, just I think he's really good at making these one-off stories, similar to how Moffat is, and then he hopefully should do more of that with his new stuff. But yeah, overall, I think this is probably a 9 out of 10 or 9.5 out of 10. I think that within itself, I've watched it so many times, and within it's still creepy, it's still scary, and I think the fact that even the Doctor doesn't know what the threat is sort of has that sort of eeriness. I think like they're not diluted by any means, but the fact the Doctor has faced the Daleks and the Cybermen so many times, you sort of like, well, he knows the game. I was recently listening to an audio drama that I will review in the future, the 11th Doctor Chronicles, Everywhere and Anywhere and Everywhere, and that includes the Cybermen in Sins of Flesh story. I was like, even in that one, the companion he's with in those stories, who I will go into when I do those reviews, even she knew of the Cybermen. So you sort of have that issue of they are scary, like, but they sort of, the Doctor knows the game. He knows what they are. He knows like that the Daleks are Khaled mutants and they're hate machines made by Davros. With the Midnight Entity, he has no idea what he's facing, and I think that's brilliant, and I think it's really scary, because even as viewers, you would perceive the Doctor as someone who's almost all-knowing, and the fact he just has no idea what he's completely out of his depth. I think that just makes it a really good story. So I'd definitely give this at least a 9 out of 10, possibly a 9.5 out of 10. And I'd say it's certainly Tennant's best story, certainly his best acted one, and I think that's why it should definitely be reviewed as such. And then hopefully, again, I'll continue on with the Wild Blue Yonder and the Giggle stories next week and the week after, and that'll be the end of his run. But this is definitely his best one. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy it, please consider liking and subscribing, as it does help me out. But I'll see you in the next one. See ya.